lectures initiated and hosted by my colleague Lisa Denise from Eclipse Herbal and me, Gaia Mijnarico Sole from Trajna. And we started the series with a wish to present amazing projects from artists, herbalists, and ecologists working on creative solutions to the spread of invasive plants. Our endeavor provides a collective platform to share our professional approaches, which aim at creating new opportunities for holistic understanding and interaction with novel ecosystems. Invasive Species Creative Proposal Series is part of the project RUC, a network of art and culture research centers working on crossroads of art, science, and technology, co-financed by the Republic of Slovenia and the European Regional Development Fund. Additional support for the project comes from the Brooklyn Arts Council, Neighborhood Design Development, Baltimore, and viewers like you. I'm happy that today we can introduce you to the work of Niek Kosten, Belgium-based design researcher, tutor, and graphic designer. Niek is part of the research unit Interactions of LUCA School of Arts, where he's currently working on his PhD on vernacular design, graphic design, in the context of critically opening up societal issues. His talk today will focus on a course called Shifting Grounds, where students explored artistic strategies for a renewed connection with the natural environment by investigating the invasive Japanese knotweed and its position in the Belgian social and environmental landscape. Students investigated the specificities, challenges, and opportunities that this exotic brings. Together with photographer Kristof Vrancken, Niek Kosten co-designed a book, Not in My Backyard, which showcases a wide array of experimental work that explores various visual and imaginative strategies to relate the issue of invasiveness and connect with our natural habitat as a whole. It presents a collection of rhizomatic ideas, invasive insights, and artistic interpretations, adapting to a world in transformation. And as Niek states, by renegotiating the position of knotweed, we might find a new way of living together. Niek, thank you so much for being part of this series and for attending this talk and doing this talk. Without further delay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll quickly share my presentation. Okay, great. So thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you all for attending also. As Gaia said, I have also done some work on invasive species, which I will try to do a short presentation about how we approach this. So yeah, this was kind of an introduction slide, but I think I summed it up pretty much as a whole. So what the important thing maybe to kind of frame my own research practice and design practice that I work around is these societal issues. These are very different contexts, oftentimes about social cohesion, about identity, about displacement. I've worked about representation, participation, etc. What I mainly do in these contexts or in these teams is that I use design strategies to open up or to critically open up, as Gaia also mentioned in her introduction, these issues, meaning that it's not necessarily directly to solve very specific issues, but more to question them, to maybe provoke reflection, frame them in a different way, rethink them, visualize them, or explore alternatives. So that's kind of the field that I'm working in, and the methodologies that I use. And a few years ago, I was sitting at my desk at work, and my colleague Kristof Vrancken comes up to me, and he says, "I got this great idea for a new project to work on together. Do you know this plant called Japanese knotweed?" And that was kind of the start. Interestingly enough, and we didn't immediately make the connection, but 11 years ago, I was working for Z33, which is a house for contemporary art, architecture and design in Hasselt, where I also live in Belgium. I was doing my first project. I just graduated. I was doing the graphic design for this exhibition by Kristof Vrancken, who is a Belgian visual artist. And Kristof was also working there as photographer at the time, and that was actually the first time that we met and kind of collaborated around the same project. And Kristof Vrancken, as part of his exhibition, made this sub-project, as to say, called Exalt. And inside the building of Z33, he created this kind of Garden of Eden, but only with invasive species, so both animals as plants. So this included American bullfrogs, rose-ring parakeets, bamboo, rhododendron, and of course, Japanese knotweed also, and many others. So it was really interesting that we had this unnamed link back then, which you could say would be the kind of seed for our idea to work around this invasives. I must say, before Kristof brought this up, he asked me this question, I already knew the name of the plant. I knew something about invasives, but I couldn't recognize it if it was if I was looking at a forest or a spot full of green. So yeah, I was kind of suffering from plant blindness, which was kind of a recurring theme also in our project, about how to work around this plant blindness of, yeah, not recognizing a certain plant, but just seeing, okay, that's a lot of shrubbery or some trees. And maybe I can read a small excerpt, which is in our book also, which kind of describes this first meeting together. There we were on a cold gray afternoon along a busy road, a forgotten backside, which for lack of economic value had been reappropriated by non-humans, for now anyway. Together we stared at a meter-long mass of warm browns with the last remnants of leafy greens and bright yellows here and there. The falling of the leaves exposed the jagged structure of the woody stems with a few dried petals still on the ends. It felt uncomfortable, not towards the other human being next to me, but towards this third new actor we wanted to work with. We did not yet know each other well, so the rapprochement was tentative, scanning. My bias was colored by superficial stories and imagery about diffusion and contagion, and tinged with words like proliferate, repress, and invade. It was a feeling that would return at subsequent encounters, but would soften each time and give way for a greater curiosity, understanding, and respect. Cautiously, we made our way deeper into the wild, past many nettles and thistles, and found masses of 3-meter-tall groups of Japanese knotweed hiding, to our surprise, a stream. It could thrive there and did not leave much room for the passage of others. The sudden jump from a paved parking lot to a seemingly different world a dozen meters apart was alienating. I almost experienced our presence there as disruptive. There we were on a cold gray afternoon as intruders, or rather visitors, into someone else's world. Terra incognita, we come in peace. So I can immediately jump to the end now of the project, which we ended up creating a book filled with a wide range of experiments from our own practice. So Kristof as a photography practice also does research, has finished his PhD a few weeks ago, actually. Which this was also part of this case study. And I, from more a graphic design point of view, and we kind of worked together of really opening our eyes to this new actor in our environment, and opening ourselves up to finding new ways adapted to this actor of specifically Japanese knotweed, and finding ways of working on this project together. So the subtitle kind of sums it up and indicates a lot how we worked and what our vision was, how we worked on it, as it was an incomplete visual, physical, and societal dissection of the invasive plant species Japanese knotweed. So importantly here is not only this visual aspect of which we all could see it, also the physical, and definitely the last part, societal, how we as a society perceive this invasive alien, or at least this plant species, and how we can act towards it. It was a kind of a very wide array, which also included, as said in the introduction, working together with our design students on these projects for now the last 2 years, which sums up a kind of a group of, I think, 30 or 40 students from all kind of different perspectives approaching this issue or challenge around invasives. So what comes next for the rest of the presentation, I have a lot of examples about kind of works that we did, different approaches, etc. So yeah, let's just start. Maybe to frame it first, I always find this interesting to know the context from which everybody is working. This was our context, which is, well, it's half of Belgium, which is the region of Flanders. And here you can see the map of the spread of Japanese knotweed in Flanders, but these are was the latest map from 2006, and judging from the evolution in in my own city and the surroundings, I can imagine in an updated version there will be many more dots added at least. So although there is a wide spread, there are no rules or laws prohibiting the spread or of this invasive species. But there are many programs and projects set up by governmental organizations, but also nature conservation associations, which search for management techniques to kind of control the spread more. It's very interesting work that they are doing. And something that probably a lot of you have noticed working on an invasive species, and which was something that struck us first also, is this language that is used to describe invasive species. I mentioned it in the introduction already, how this is these words of invasive, spreading, and eradication, etc. Are quite abundantly used. As a graphic designer, I was also very interested in how this language translates to visual language that is used. I've kind of made a mapping for myself of these maybe quite extreme cases sometimes of how these visuals try to impact kind of, or create a kind of feeling of fear around invasive species. I made this kind of collage, which is also part of the book as a kind of exaggeration, but maybe not really exaggeration, because there are literally things that I found all around. I think this is very pervasive in the UK, this kind of imagery. But yeah, it's a correct translation, I think, from the words that are being used to describe these challenges, these issues. I find that the contrast with this historical research that we did on the plant, also part of the project, where at least what we could find this was the first scientific illustration that was made in, I have to check my notes, 1849 by Willem Hendrik de Vries, which was kind of the first scientific illustration of the first specimen that was live specimen, at least, that was brought over to Europe at that time by von Siebold. And it was documented in this large yearbook from the Dutch king to promote gardening. And this contrast, and we also introduced this with our students, which say to show this contrast, how this plant was brought here to Western Europe as a kind of very lush ornamental plant to have these aesthetic qualities in Victorian gardens, and the contrast, but with how we are dealing this now, also visually, it's very interesting to note. Something that we started to do from the start, because we have this wide map of Flanders with different areas where the Japanese knotweed is present, but which we actually started to map also in our own environment. So when we started the project, it was around the same time that the pandemic started. And at the time, we were restricted to, I think, 15 kilometers from our own home. It was the very serious lockdown, and which forced us to make it very, our mapping very location specific, but it allowed us to really focus on this small area that covered our own city and our neighboring city in which we work. So this is a work in progress. It doesn't cover everything, but there were a lot of spots discovered through this map. Yeah, we also use Google Maps often to have like this a time machine to go back and see the evolution of different spots in our own environments. So what Kristof definitely did very beautifully is also from this mapping translate a lot of interesting spots into interesting photography. This is an example of, go back to the map. I don't know, see this very large concentration of markers at the bottom left, which kind of also, and that was something that came forth from the mapping that we discovered in also in our own environment, which is also kind of mentioned a lot in literature, that a lot of this spread of Japanese knotweed, maybe all the spread of Japanese knotweed, is caused by human intervention. And what we notice in our own environment, that a lot of hotspots, so to say, to use the vernacular of heat maps, was that around a lot of large infrastructure works, we saw large amounts of Japanese knotweed, and this is at that spot right next to a highway where they created a new IKEA, which is very large parking lots, and that also need a lot of infrastructure works, because before that there was just there was no man at that spot present, and the impact of the Japanese knotweed, at least, was very apparent. Kristof made this large night and evening series highlighting these plants in different seasons. Another thing that we noticed working with Japanese knotweed, and which also immediately impressed our students and myself also, is this when it reaches a kind of height, Japanese knotweed up to 3 to 4 meters, and in large bushes where we would really adventure into them, was that it's quite impressive to just be there. You're really in awe of this plant, And we tried to capture, Kristof at least tried to capture this with making 360 images, kind of also you can experience in VR and do a walk in this 360. Another thing that we did was really work around these physical attributes of Japanese knotweed and really getting hands-on. So here's a more kind of this idea of dissection becomes a little bit more literal, where we really make kind of these beautiful studio images of the plant in its different phases throughout the seasons, which here, for example, is focused on the spots that the young sprouts have. On the left, you find kind of its graphic translation of these spots into a pattern, and on the right you see a microscopic image of these spots. We have this wide range of really beautiful microscopic pictures. Another thing that we did look at a short experiment was to make a frottage, which is also called a rubbing. So it's you're using the leaves of Japanese knotweed to make kind of this pressing, and immediately there was this kind of composition that reminded me to this large bushes of Japanese knotweed. Here in this example, it was well transformed into a rhizo print, printed on the knotweed paper from Gaia and China. Well, of course, when you're working with plants, once you get into this context and this team of plants, I'm guessing most people has made this step of using parts of the plants as natural dyes. It's something that is all around, and it's usually with a lot of students the first step they also take. And we immediately have this reflex because we did it ourselves also. Okay, yeah, I've seen that before. We know how natural dyeing works. But actually, it was kind of it's not that we then stopped it, but because it is. We saw it as a very good way to really get hands-on with this plant, where a lot of students maybe would kind of shy away in the first periods or the first classes of, okay, this plant, I don't know what to do with it. This was usually a good step to really, yeah, quite literally get close, but also get kind of comfortable with the plant. So we encourage that a lot. These are our two textiles that we dyed ourselves, the left one with the rhizome and the right one with the pink one with the young stems. The work that Kristof does focuses heavily on making ontotype prints. This is kind of very old technique of developing photos using natural pigments also from plants. He does this with a wide range of plants, but we also did this short experiment with I think, I'm not sure which part it was. I think it's from the leaves and stems together, and quite interestingly, it actually formed a negative image instead of a positive image, which was usually the case with most plants or berries, things like that he used and that he experimented with. So another thing that we did with this coloring technique to take it a kind of step further was I dyed some spools of threads and different colors from different colors of the plant, and these spools of threads were hand woven into, as you see here, a kind of flag. It was done because in my work, like I said, I also work a lot around identity, and I think it's very interesting to think about from a visual point of view how we translate this idea of identity to something visual, something that we look at. And I'm very much interested in how we can get past this kind of maybe reductive. You can say that flags are often kind of a reductive form of identity, being it's okay, these 3 colors represent my entire identity of my country. And this was kind of an attempt, an experiment to make this a little bit more complex, using these dyes from the plant itself, really weaving them together to get this new pattern when you look at it from afar, and the different colors when you see it from up close. This interest in this color, and the same with this kind of reductiveness, was translated also into kind of making a color library for Japanese knotweeds. So instead of then reducing it to like how things usually work in the graphic design and corporate identity and things like that, reducing it to like 3 main colors or 4 main colors, and this is what you used to create this identity. What we actually did was take all the colors from the plant, and bring them together. We did this is an example of a picture of a young stem, but we did this for every phase of the plant, you might say, every season, where we created a computer program that literally takes every unique color out of this image and recomposes it. So really, it's also how it's also presented here. It's very kind of scientific approach. Another thing that was also quite technologically oriented was this experiment where we actually approached this idea of a Helm network, so a generative adversarial network, which is kind of this system that builds on a very large database of images. You might have seen it online already. You can it kind of it learns this from this very large set of images, and it allows you to itself to create new images from that. It's in a very basic level now, but probably you could type in a cat with a hat and it would create a new image that doesn't exist before, but based on learning from a lot of other images, a cat with a hat. Here you see what happens when you, I think on the left it was the description that I put in the system was Japanese knotweed in a forest, and on the right it was alien invasive plant species. You see here that this perception of this input, maybe it will take notions from it, but it doesn't quite understand it. So this was just an idea of, okay, the state that these smart machines, smart programs are in right now. What is their perception of these? At least our English description of these plant species. Yeah, we also had some fun with making some floral arrangements as kind of an aside. And then here I would like to switch to really the student work that they done. So like I said, it took place over the last 2 years, with 2 different classes, and it was really, for us, it was really about expanding our own views on the issue of Japanese knotweed, and having our students kind of reconnecting with nature, and also from their own discipline, see how nature can have this part in their discipline. A lot of the students that signed up because it was something they could choose. They had often this kind of interest. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 students who really had this I think, wanted biologists as parents. So the starting point is quite different, which was also very, very interesting. But a lot of these students are kind of estranged from nature. They much like myself maybe had this, okay, I enjoy being in nature, but don't ask me what exactly that plant is, to kind of sum it up. So it was really great but they all had a very, very large interest of, or they had a knowledge of, okay, this is something lacking lacking in my design work, in myself, and they wanted to reconnect. So it was a very open course, actually, where we really started from their own wishes and desires, from their own views that they already had, because some of them knew Japanese knotweed, but maybe had already this negative image that is more widely spread in society also. Others had really no idea, but really open to, okay, what is this problem that we're having here, or this challenge? So that was actually summed up our main goal of this course called Shifting Grounds. So our plan was to really, from the start, immerse them quite literally, as you see here in this picture. So we invited lecturers like Kaya and Andre, but also curators who were working on the Anthropocene. We shared our own experience, also together with another colleague, Rosanna Klaver, who is working a lot about rewilding principles. We did guided tours with experts from nature conservation associations. And we also did hands-on workshops to really get this process of really getting physical with this plant started. So the basic workshop on how to distract dyes from the plants. And we also, I think it was in October, we visited a place in Ghent, which is also in Belgium, in TimeLab, where they are working on how do you say it? They call it a knotplex. So it's a fiberboard plate, which has this which has, instead of wooden fibers, which has dried knotweed fibers as a basic ingredient. And they're really collaborating with a lot of people to see how to turn this really into a viable product. But the main aim is to use this waste stream of Japanese knotweed that is very present in this city also, which the city workers each year put a lot of time in to cut them down, the dried stems, and they use this as a waste material to create new fiber boards. But yeah, we went with the students there also to see their practice, and they also did a workshop there, making their own fiber boards. So I have this list of examples. I couldn't include them all, but I tried to show again the wide array of examples of work that the students did. It's good also to mention that the disciplines that the students were coming from were product design, interaction design, photography, animation, and film. I think that's it. So again, it's a wide group. They could work together. Some work together. Most of them did individual projects. They were all master students, so that means they were in their fourth year, I think. So they already had this kind of vision of, okay, this is the way I work, which we found very interesting. So this first one is from Sander Vogelaars, who made, who was if I remember correctly, very inspired by this lecture we had on rewilding principles. So he looked back on how people used to bring light into their home when there was no electricity, and he created this new. It's a type of candle. It's called a rushlight, which is not as bright as a candle, which was also made from natural materials. I believe it was spiritus and animal grease that was used. Anyway, he saw the dried stems of the Japanese knotweed and thought, okay, maybe that's a good thing to use, because they were hollow inside parts. It can get quite dry. So he did really this, from a product design point of view, did really this material experiments with possibilities to dry. How can I make it burn longer, etc. What parts can I use? What parts shouldn't I use? So this is a sketch of the process of how you can make your own, but he also really made it himself. He even at this created this possibility to add some lavender scent, etc. Another one was which was also really hands-on, but was maybe in a sense a little bit more conceptual, was the work of Dale, who created the furniture series. So he was also a product designer, who really went to work with the material he had. Interestingly, these furniture that he made, so he made a lamp, a kind of small stool, and a chair to sit on. But with all these objects, he kind of try to question some of these aspects that we are dealing with as a society of who is controlling who. We are trying to control these Japanese knotweed, but sometimes are failing, and maybe we shouldn't try to control. So it's really interesting in that aspect, and he tried to translate it also in how these objects were designed, both aesthetically as in use. Another really hands-on project was from Leonie and Kim, who were photography students actually, but their starting point was really when they, probably when we talked about natural dyeing and things like that, they reflected it on the fashion industry, which, if I'm not mistaken, they were already working around. Specifically the sustainability of fashion industry, which is of course questioned a lot. And they actually used, as you see here, local sheep's wool, really processed it and dyed it with the leaves, with dye extracted from the leaves from a Japanese knotweed, which created this object and made this photo series to question the sustainability. A little bit more conceptual and maybe speculative work was by Cedric, who actually created this speculative scenario, where we envisioned a future where plants who were native in Europe were almost extinct. And to translate this, you created this, how should I say it? A secret plan to spread the seeds of plants that were native to Europe abroad in specific locations, which were, you really research this. Okay, same climate, same soil, where could our native plants also grow? And he used the popular Belgian sport of the pigeon sport as a kind of, he designed containers which could carry the seeds, and the pigeon sport would go to, for instance, Japan, and then disseminate all the seeds there. He made this into a very convincing story by presenting it as a kind of, from a kind of European Council point of view. We really made this report with a lot of heat maps, framing the problem, kind of exaggerating also the problem, and proposing this plan. Yeah. So another very similar, and somebody who kind of took it a step further than Cedric, was Nathan, who was, I think, very interested in this this idea of fear and danger that comes along with at least how it is portrayed a lot, invasive species, and he really doubled down on this. Also, again, to question it, of course, why we should be afraid of this. And he kind of transformed the invasive species into a kind of bioweapon. So he used parts of the rhizome of the knotweed, which is kind of the strongest thing to use to spread. And he created a system of biodegradable containers. Yeah, again, he was also a product designer, which could be carried by drones, as you see here in the picture, which could then spread on enemy soil to damage certain infrastructure. It would take some time, of course, years, but that was his idea. He was, of course, inspired by you've probably seen it yourself, by drones that are now used to also plant forests. Okay, this is another one from Giacomo. He was a animation or is an animation student, and he was really amazed by the power, also amazed, like a lot of students, amazed by the power of the plants. And he linked this, to animism in Japanese folklore and Shintoism, which is giving kind of spirit-like attributes to all things, actually, and definitely also plants. And from this, he drew a lot of inspiration to create a new cryptid, which is kind of a Bigfoot, Loch Ness kind of modern interpretation. And he called it the Knotweed Queen. And he really told the story of this person. He created this very 2005-ish blog where he chronicles these narrative of a person that's kind of a little bit paranoid, maybe, in discovering this cryptid, who's very interested in nature and documents his stories there, and kind of inadvertently discovers this Knotweed Queen. I think it was very much inspired also by the fact that while most Japanese knotweed in Europe are actually clones from this one plant that was brought over here and resides in the University of Leiden. I think that was also his idea around it. Oh, what happened here? Do you see it or do you see white? Well, it doesn't matter, I'll skip it.
Yeah, it loaded some blue, but
then it disappears, right? Yeah. Okay, I'll skip it. This is the work of Kevin, which where he made kind of photogram of leaves of Japanese knotweed. It's kind of really visual aesthetic work. He's a photography student. He created a paper from Japanese knotweeds, and then created photograms of leaves, really pressed into it, laid on it, etc. Was a series of I think 5 or 6 of these pieces. Well, another speculative work. There are a lot of speculative works next to really hands-on work, I think. But I think it's really interesting because they usually use this as a vehicle to really engage with these societal challenges that we have to think about. And this was a project on which as me and Alexander collaborated, also 2 photography students. And they also created this fictional scenario where they saw the resilience of Japanese knotweed, the possibility of survival of this plant as an opportunity to save other plants from extinction, actually. And they created this also fictional biolab, which promotes this idea of crossing DNA of Japanese knotweed with crops like soy and corn in a fight against pollution. That's how they framed it, at least. And to communicate this idea and this narrative about this future possibility, they created a series of images straight from the lab where they are doing this research on Japanese knotweed and researching way of kind of extracting DNA, the appropriate DNA, and transferring it to other plants and crops. And maybe to finish up this long list of very different approaches, work by Jessica and Joke, who are animation students. They were really interested and they had this, well, I think same core idea that we also work around, is kind of finding a way to, and it's not the right word, but it also says a lot, kind of humanizing the plant, not making it adapt to us, of course, and how we are, but kind of finding an opening for a lot of people to not see it as the other, as not part of us, because we are also nature, of course, but we kind of seem to forget it a lot. So they designed a tea ceremony, of course, very inspired by the Japanese roots also of tea ceremonies. But they use these tea ceremonies as places to have conversations about invasives, about Japanese knotweed, and really kind of use it as a way to tear down the divide that is kind of artificially there. So they created attributes to accompany this ceremony. They created teacups from the idea of the knotplex system of making new objects. So using fibers of Japanese knotweed and molding them into a kind of form for cups, and these other attributes which are sketched here. So this is just a kind of sketch they made, but they are also made this in real life. And they kind of invited people to sit there. Of course, the tea was also made from Japanese knotweed leaves, which wasn't quite great. It didn't have a lot of flavor. But when you joined the conversation, you were also giving us kind of backstory, which kind of allowed you, or at least they invited you, to kind of come into a mindset of a plant, to think from the position of the plant, and have a conversation from this idea of being a plant, which is quite interesting. And they really search for this moment of empathy to create. And I think, yeah, that was something that we really shared throughout this entire research project, and which in the end, well, maybe started from the idea of, okay, we don't know it, and we have to find kind of a way to get to know this plant. And also as a designer, artist, how can we do this, get to know them? But we found ourselves quite quickly forming this bond with this plant, immediately understanding why it come here, what it is doing, why it is acting like this. and our own role in it as a human. So this reflection, and then of course through the way that we do these experiments, how we do this visualization, this conceptual work from students and from ourselves, we noticed it was a great, it worked really great for immediately our immediate environment, at least to have this conversation starter, to have this attention to this plant, and where people mostly say, okay, yeah, I've heard it before, and I saw the news article 2 weeks ago that it was, there was a lot of spread because there were floods and blah, 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 blah. So it was really that role that became very interesting, and which we noticed quite quickly, and our students also noticed quite quickly. They talked to us that how they, okay, my grandma said that about the plant, and now she knows that I'm working on the plant. And I told her, okay, but it's different. It's maybe not as dangerous as you think. And yeah, it was really a lot of conversation starters. And now every one of our colleagues at least knows that we are working on this plant, and where they maybe at this first negative conceptions, they find this very interesting, and see this as a new way to think about it, not just in wrong or right, but in the middle. So this process for us was really about de-learning and rethinking, I think, for ourselves, but also from others. And then, as already said, in the end, we hope to find a new way, at least, of living together. Thank you very much.